Are you not entertained? I'm John Stark from MyMovieGuy.com, and that's just a good general question. This is like your survey for the year. And on a scale of 1 to 10, are you entertained? Please let me know in comments. I'm a blind film critic, and I've seen Gladiator 2. this is this is that review. This movie does have audio description. Makes some interesting choices, so we'll get into that. I was pretty intrigued with some of the choices that the audio description made, and it's directed by Ridley Scott, and stars Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal. Connie Nielsen's back from the original film. Derek Jacobi is back from the original film, and I believe Djimon Hounsou is also back from the original film. So there's definitely a little bit of new mixed with a little bit of old. We've also got a couple of weird brothers that are in charge of Rome. I feel like they should they cohesively exist as one person for most of the film, but that's whatever. Anyway, so this is Gladiator 2. Now, what's the plot? It's it centers on Lucius, who is Maximus's son, who was played by Spencer Treat Clark in the original movie, but has grown up into Paul Mescal, which is unfortunate because Spencer Treat Clark still acts. So Spencer Treat Clark could have actually grown up into Spencer Treat Clark, but unfortunately, Ridley Scott wanted somebody hotter and beefier, I'm sure. So, must be awkward to know that you could have actually played the character, but nobody asked you back. Anyway, so Mescal is now in the character, and he had been sent away, and he was living in a far-off land, but not too far from Rome's reach, because the Roman armies come and conquer. They're led by Pedro Pascal, who we come to know is also the new husband to Connie Nielsen's character, and they are actually in love, and he seems to be genuinely a good person who just sort of does what he's told, and when he does what he's told, it also protects her, because the new leaders of Rome would much rather get rid of her since she's tied to the old emperor, the old way. She's the last remnants of this bygone era that they would like to, they're very much all about, well, this is our Rome, and this is what we're doing. You don't even see much from the Senate. Derek Jacobi is pretty much reduced to having a gambling addiction in this. It's kind of funny. Denzel Washington is sort of in charge of the Colosseum, the gladiators, setting up the fights. He's somebody who obviously does not have a station within Rome, but he trades on secrets and power and money and works his way up eventually so that he can get as much power as possible by the end of the film. It seems to be his goal. So he's always looking for ways to benefit himself and not necessarily anybody else. So if you're friends with him, you're friends with him only to a point. He's very sneaky. Sneak. So at some points he can be a good guy, because if your stuff aligns with his, then he'll keep you around. But at other times he is a bad guy because you no longer align with him. So it's not that complicated of a performance, but I figured I'd go into it a little bit since we're talking about giving him another Oscar nomination for it. And, the film just kind of plays out like you would expect. Lucius returns to Rome. He's upset because his people were killed. He lost his family in this raid. So it's a lot like Maximus, but without the grandeur of how Ridley Scott shot the first film. This film just kind of comes in and has like a war sequence It's a lot clunkier. It doesn't have nearly the style that Scott used to have. That opening sequence of the first Gladiator is fucking terrific. You know, I mean, like, it's not only is it well written, it's beautifully acted. It's shot in a unique way. It feels dramatic. It doesn't feel like it's there for action. A lot of this just feels like Ridley Scott was here for action. Like he didn't actually think Gladiator 2 was going to be Best Picture nominee either, but he wanted it to be entertaining. So that's why I asked, are you not entertained? Because I think I look at this movie and I'm like, I don't know that he actually wanted another best, you know, because it's a very either that or else he's just forgotten what he's, to use the Austin Powers term, his mojo, um, and can't seem to figure out how to bring it back. But I've seen glimmers of that mojo in movies like The Last Duel, where he has a little bit of style to it, a little bit of substance. This just doesn't have the style and substance. This just has action, brutality. This is far more made for the masses. You know, this is more like a very mainstream approach. It's almost like the reverse of what we did with Top Gun, where Top Gun Maverick came in with some serious drama and subtext, but the original Top Gun has none of that, and it's just like fluff and fun. This kind of feels like the reverse of that, where Gladiator had all this like subtext and those beautiful sequences where, you know, he's sort of being drugged through the fields, and just some of the shots they got in Gladiator like have stayed with me, even though I'm blind now. I just permanently. I already have a review on my channel of Gladiator, so I didn't want to just like review it again. But you can always just check that out if you want. But it is one of my favorite films, and I stand by that Best Picture the Best Picture win. It also would have been a nice year to give Ridley Scott the director Oscar that he's never gotten before, because it's definitely a good enough film for him. It's probably one of his best. It's easily like a top 3 film for Ridley Scott, I think, in throughout his career. Obviously, it's really hard to go back and say Alien. You know, I know a lot of people want to do that, but Alien was not as well received uh, in its inception, which is why it doesn't have like a Best Picture nomination. It's a horror film. You got the whole genre bias. It was never going to happen. So, here, Paul Mescal has the unfortunate task of taking over essentially Russell Crowe's stance. And they've given him far too many things that are similar in nature to what Maximus went through in the first film, like the loss of family, um, feeling of betrayal, uh, you know, needing to fight to get his way out of the Colosseum. All those kind of things are just, they are kind of retreads. It's just like this is a character who um, was born into privilege. So, like one of my favorite scenes in this movie is he hasn't talked the whole time after he's been captured, mainly because he's just really pissed off. But he hasn't talked to any of the Romans who captured him, so they assume he can't. And then when he finally does, it's like poetry. So it's not just he's not just like uttering words to them. He went in with like educated words, and it kind of gives everybody pause as to like, who is this guy? Like it adds more to the mystery about him. But that's one of the little changes, the one of the differences is that obviously while he was running around as a kid, he had access to the most education he could possibly get at that time. So, so interesting to see Derek Jacobi here, and it made me think, how old is Derek Jacobi? And it made me realize how old he actually was in Gladiator 2, in Gladiator, and he actually wasn't that old. He was only like 60. So, um, yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of Crow in here too. There's like some flashback stuff that they do where they pull like a memory from the first movie and stuff. So you'll hear his voice in the movie. Connie Nielsen, she has like a couple little things. There's not much They could have gone more in depth with her. She definitely comes alive, reactionary to some stuff that happens sort of in the third act of the movie. There is a great scene between that I always knew how that scene was going to end, by the way, but there's a great scene between two of the leads. I don't even want to reveal which ones because as soon as I say it, you'll be like, ah, well, okay. But there's a great scene between two of the leads, and I always knew how that scene was going to end. It was the least suspenseful moment of the film. I was like, welp. There's some interesting choices here that work for me. There's a funny moment where there's this monkey that they name as a consort. I thought that was funny. The brothers here are kind of a little bit of a gag. They're very high strung, very intense, very like screaming and shouting all the time. And I don't know, just like spoiled brats who just grew like their parents grew like died or something before they ever got around to like course correcting spoiled brats. So if your child has ever thrown a tantrum, just imagine what that would look like, but as like an adult, like an actual like 5-year-old tantrum. That's what these two are like. They're like just, and then they're running Rome. It's such an odd choice that I don't even know how to handle the actors because it's supposed to be a drama, but every time they were doing something, it was making me laugh. So I couldn't take them seriously um, because they're so childish and childlike, which I know is exactly what he's going for. But sometimes there's a way of doing it and there's a way of overdoing it. And I think you kind of almost push into comedy with those two. Um, just, I don't know. Uh, I would say, in terms of spoiled brats, I know people didn't think that the show was very good, but Those About to Die, which had Anthony Hopkins sort of in it, there's a brother relationship in that show, and they're both sort of, at least one of them is a pretentious asshole. So I thought that maybe a little bit more of that, where you see somebody who you're like, well, clearly they're out of touch, but not like full on. Uh, I don't know, man. It's an experience. It's an experience. So, yeah, I don't really need any of the actors here to be nominated for anything, including Denzel, by the way. He's fine. The thing is that Denzel is always good. It's one of those things, and I sort of mentioned this in other reviews of other people and other performances, is that these people who have 27 amazing performances already and are just like making check marks on their list, and it's like, well, and we know we're great, whether you're Denzel in Gladiator or Kate Winslet in Lee or I don't know, Nicole Kidman in Baby Girl, Amy Adams in Night Bitch. There are a whole bunch of performances this year that you can say that's a really good performance. It's not their best, and when we're done with their career, it's not going to be in their top five. It's probably not going to be in their top 10. But because you can easily think of performances that they've already done that you would not put above that performance. Like none of these people have exceeded themselves, and part of that is because they are so good that they're amassing these careers. I'm much more interested in seeing somebody who feels like they've hit their peak, they've hit their stride. Like this is the moment that, this is the final, like the right performance for them, or we haven't seen this in years. Those kind of performances. Something like Guy Pearce in The Brutalist really interests me because he started to dip in like Liam Neeson movies, and now he's in The Brutalist, and he's fantastic. And that man's never gotten an Oscar nomination before. So like, if it's between Guy Pearce or Denzel Washington, I'm voting Guy Pearce all day, every day, all day, every day. But I actually think Denzel's the better actor, like consistently across all of his films. But That doesn't mean that he needs a 10th Oscar nomination for Gladiator 2, which I actually think this would be his 10th nomination. Um, could he get in? Sure. The supporting actor category is kind of weak, but when you look at how you could put it, Kieran Culkin first nomination, Guy Pearce first nomination, Clarence Macklin first nomination. You could do your Borisov first nomination, and then it gets down to what do you do? Do you give Edward Norton another nomination? Or do you give Denzel another nomination? Do you give Stanley Tucci another nomination? It'd be nice to see Peter Sarsgaard for September 5 because he's never been nominated. It's just never going to happen. So I think Denzel's probably going to get in, unless people just totally forget this movie and Edward Norton takes the final spot, or they snub somebody like Clarence Macklin, which shouldn't happen. No one else is going to get nominated from this film. We've all accepted the fact that Paul Mescal's out of the Best Actor race, mainly because he's so directly going to be compared to Russell Crowe, and he's just not given the material. It's not that Paul Mescal's a bad actor. I think he's a phenomenal actor. I think he was beautiful last year in All of Us Strangers, and before that in Aftersun. So he's doing good work. He'll come back to the Oscars. It's just not going to be this year. And Pedro, actually, when I was looking at the film, when all was said and done, I was more interested in Pedro's performance than anybody else's because I thought he was given some interesting stuff to do. He sort of has a couple of really strong scenes. I was much more surprised with how much I loved Pedro's performance. Although even with Pedro, he's fantastic on Last of Us. So like I can already think of something where I'm like, well, I think I like him better on that. So, and I want to be able to like somebody and be like, man, this might be the best thing you've ever done, and go for that person. So, yeah, and I can say that with Guy Pearce. Might be the best thing he's ever done. Certainly the best thing since Memento. I think Memento would be the only thing I can think of from Guy Pearce and that's the closest I can come to probably of any established actor. It's not really fair to say with Clarence Macklin or Borisov because I'm not familiar with anything else I've ever done. So that's the best supporting actor race. Also rolled into this review of Gladiator 2, which is silly fun. The shark scene is obnoxious. It's why are there sharks? The thing is that the Coliseum actually used to do the stagings with the boats, but I don't think they've ever found that historically they used to put sharks in there. I think that's just a Ridley Scott thing. So, but yeah, this is a movie, and I didn't hate it. I actually did not hate this at all. But in terms of sequels this year, this is sort of like Furiosa, where we came along and Mad Max Fury Road was phenomenal. Then we got Furiosa, which was fine. I thought I liked Furiosa, but in no way do I think it's Mad Max Fury Road. I don't have the same kind of level of love for it. So in terms of just a couple of sequels that were supposed to really pop this year, I mean, this is not Joker Folie à Deux either. This didn't completely fall off the wagon. This didn't just, we've had a couple this year that are just, a couple of sequels that just totally missed the mark. Despicable Me 4 is just a mess of a movie. But this is more, yeah, like Twisters and Furiosa, where it's like, okay, that was fine. So I'm good with that. And it's I really wanted Ridley to get the nomination. I really wanted Ridley to get a win. It's so weird to think of him at 86 and be like, seeing a couple of the last movies he's made, Napoleon, House of Gucci, you're like, this guy's never gonna he's never gonna make it. He's never gonna win a competitive directing nomination, but yet most people would agree Ridley Scott's one of the greatest directors. So very odd for him, but yeah, it's not happening this year. Sorry. Audio description, I like some of the choices that it made because it went into the specificity of the scene. Like, there's a singer that's a castrato, and I love the fact that it used the term castrato, which is a choice because they could have just, there are a couple of other vocal ranges, some other terms, sopranista, countertenor, they could have used, but they went with what they believed was historically accurate. So, which makes people look up what that is if they don't know what it is. So, but there are other ways of describing a man singing in that range that would have been easier without hinting at a specific thing that has to happen in order for somebody to become that. Uh, there was during the opening title sequence, there was like a shift after we got through the actors, where it was like, it said something like lead production credits, something which I thought was interesting that we transitioned into that. Like, we wouldn't understand when you said, written by so and so, original score by, you know, like, they're just credits. Like, I don't need like the midsection to let me know that we've transitioned away from actors. But cool, you know. By the way, I thought the score was fine, but it's not memorable. Like, nobody's gonna play Gladiator 2 for me. I'm gonna be like, wow, is this Gladiator 2? I love that score. Like, I thought it was fine. This is, for anything, this is the debate that I'd like to have about why Dune 2 deserves to have not been disqualified, is because I listened to Dune 2 and I'm like, this is Dune 2, you know. I listened to Gladiator 2 and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm not gonna remember this tomorrow. And being punished for having similar themes that connect your music has never bothered them with John Williams in the Star Wars films, or like, the Harry Potter films, or Indiana Jones movies, or any other film that is like every sequel has ever been nominated. So the fact that Hans Zimmer's Dune Part 2 was disqualified from original score this year was absolutely just batshit insane. But like, Wicked is fucking in there. Go fuck yourselves. Anyway, I like the audio description to this. It made some really interesting choices. And most of them seemed like they were trying to educate along the way too, by using like historically accurate depictions of things and using actual terms. So a nice strong audio description track. Nice choice of narrator. The battle sequences, they're pretty well described. The monkey sequence is a little bit nuts. I'll give you some credit for that. That's really hard to get through. Also a scene I didn't really care for. A couple of battle sequences, I was just like, man, this is weird. They have to fight monkeys, and then later on they have to fight sharks, and it's just like, what are we doing? Paul Mescal definitely had to fight weirder shit in this movie than Russell Crowe did in the first. So, yeah, it's out there if you want to watch it. But I definitely could have used old Ridley Scott. It would have been really nice to see what he would have done. Ridley Scott from 20 years ago, what would you have done with this movie? I think we're getting to the point now where you're starting to realize he doesn't have it anymore. It's sort of like the beautiful realization that Clint Eastwood was able to turn it around with Juror Number 2. And especially considering like Cry Macho might be the worst movie he's ever made. He was able to turn it around and make a decent film. And Gladiator 2, I liked it more than Napoleon. So if he stopped with Gladiator 2, I'm good with that. Like, it's also sort of like a nice bookend. But at some point, these guys just have to realize they're not in the same wheelhouse that they once were. And we haven't seen great Ridley Scott in a while. So sad but true. God, I hope there's not some weird director's cut of Gladiator that's like 4 hours that we're going to see later on. Gladiator 2, the 4-hour cut, like they did with Napoleon, the extended cut that's on Apple. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to give Gladiator 2 a B. Yeah, it's the same grade I gave Twisters and Furiosa. So if you're wondering, that's my vibe this year for this movie. And also Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, or whatever that movie was called. That all those films got Bs from me. They're all fine sequels, but they definitely did not surpass the films that came before them. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.